Hi, BookTube, it's Amy, and today we're on page 252 of The Anatomy of Bibliomania by Holbrook Jackson, with a section titled Reading on a Journey. As traveling companions, books have no co-rivals. If they lacked either purpose or defense, this alone would justify them before men. How many hours have they scattered pleasantly on lone and long journeys? What limitless tedium they have relieved or circumvented, how they have filled the waking hours or composed the weary brain for sleep, every reader can support, and it is well known that scholars and bookmen are under no compulsion to be chained to desks or libraries. Desk or library is wherever they are. All ages produce instances, as Pliny, Erasmus, Petrarch, Samuel Johnson, Macaulay, John Addington Symonds. Some have gone so far as to construct traveling libraries for themselves, like Sir Julius Caesar, Master of the Rolls in the reign of King James I. His library went wherever he did. It was arranged in a box, shaped like a folio volume, covered with olive green morocco, finely tooled in an elaborate pattern. On the inside lid was a catalogue of the 44 books which comprised the library, together with the arms of Sir Julius and 2 of his 3 wives, with other decorations. The books were bound in vellum, tooled in gold, and furnished with variously colored ribbons to indicate whether they were theological, philosophical, historical, or poetical works. This ingenious device is now preserved in the British Museum. Napoleon had a shelf of books fitted in his coach. Pliny the Elder looked upon journeys as opportunities of escape from the tedium of affairs into the more agreeable world of books. A shorthand writer attended him in his chariot, and when in Rome he always used a sedan chair so as to continue reading or dictating. The passage in Cicero which gave Leigh Hunt most pleasure was that where he says, "Books delight us at home and are no impediment abroad," the period being rounded off to the same purpose. And we've got a line in Latin here, which, according to our footnote, translates to, "They go abroad, they go into the country," from Proarchia. He did not care to be anywhere without having a book at hand, and like Dr. Alkborn in the Camilla, he would stuff the coach or post-chaise with them whenever he traveled. Some dilate upon the number and the kind of books suitable for a journey. Lubbock advised 2 or still better 3 for a long railway journey. One of them to be an amusing character so that possible tedium could be avoided by ringing the changes, the traveller thus coming back again and again to each with renewed zest. An hour after hour would pass pleasantly away. There is some wisdom here, but it all depends on the book. The right book annihilates time wherever you are. But we are not always in luck. We cannot always guarantee the coincidence of the right book, mood, and moment. So a few general experiences may be considered. In the first place, goodness, I'm not understanding this sentence. In the first place, then read what Aldous Huxley has lately written on this subject. I'm not sure what he means by the first place. I guess first he wants us to read what Huxley has written on the subject. A traveling book is one, he says, that you can open anywhere and be sure of finding something interesting, which does not require continuous attention or prolonged mental effort. He gives as specimens any good anthology of verse, his own choice being Edward Thomas's pocketbooks of poems and songs for the open air, volumes of aphorisms, particularly La Rochefoucauld, a copy of which in sextodecimo he always carries in his upper left-hand waistcoat pocket, or one of Nietzsche's aphoristic works, Boswell's Johnson, and finally any volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica in the 12th edition, which is half the old size and on India paper. I never pass a day away from home without taking a volume with me, he confesses. It is the book of books, to all of which he brings good argument, and I do not oppose him. Nor do I argue against the taste of Petrarch, who carried with him, wherever he went, by sea or land, a copy of St. Augustine's Confessions, small enough to go into a pocket, which Father Dionyso had given him, or with Dr. Johnson, who made Cocker's Arithmetic his companion on his tour in the Hebrides, and who explained to Boswell, if you are to have but one book with you upon a journey, let it be a book of science, for when you have read through the book of entertainment, you know it, and it can do no more for you, but a book of science is inexhaustible. He put this theory into practice on a visit to Lord Bute's seat at Luton Hall with Boswell and Mr. Charles Dilly. He talked little to us in the carriage, being chiefly occupied in reading Dr. Watson's second volume of chemical essays, which he liked very well. But he alternated his reading on this journey with his own Prince of Abyssinia, on which he seemed to be intensely fixed. That quote coming from Boswell's Life. Doubtless George Moore was moved by some such idea when he made a volume of Kant his travelling companion into which he would dip, even whilst waiting for his carriage to take a party of tarts and mashers to the Derby. Sir Edward Coke advises that if a book is to make a good travelling companion, it must not be only readable and portable, it must also, within its range, be a full book. He hints that the selecting is not easy. No test of real liking for a book so searching as the choice of a travelling companion. But when they have all said their say, the best travelling book is that which you like best. That it should be portable needs no defence, and 'tis no obstacle in these days of pocketable volumes. I know of no other rule. For myself, I can read any kind of book, except light reading for travel or holiday books, on any sort of journey, except at sea in a storm. It is the same with all those happy readers who take the book of their choice in the place chance dictates, regardless of rules and advice. Picture Henry Crabb Robinson outside the Bury coach on a mid-January day, devouring Goethe's autobiography with great pleasure, and Madame de Sévigné reading alternately her Breviary and Corneille in the carriage on her journeys from Paris to her country seat in Brittany. Dr. Johnson with Pomponius Mela de Situ Urbis in the stagecoach en route for Harwich, and very intent upon ancient geography, as Boswell notes. Edward Fitzgerald communing with Sophocles, Virgil, Don Quixote, Montaigne, Boccaccio in his fishing boat off Lowestoft. Ramsay MacDonald passing the time with Hazlitt when flying from London to his native Lossiemouth. John Addington Symonds travelling from London to Florence, reading Guicciardini all the way, regardless. Says Maurice Hewlett, of the growing attractiveness of the journey and the increasing gravity of the book. A man, he well adds, who could read that book on a journey to Italy, could read Milton on top of a motor bus. Symonds could have done even that, for he was a trained and hardened reader, imperturbable amid noise and movement. It was his constant habit to do a considerable amount of hard study where traveling, and he found it difficult to enumerate how many heavy German and Italian books on history, biography, and criticism, how many volumes of Greek poets, and what a library of French and English authors had been slowly perused by him in railway stations, trains, steamers, wayside inns, and alpine chalets. Of all travel places, a railway compartment is most familiar and accessible to modern men. Whenever there are trains, there are readers. A long railway journey affords a first-rate opportunity for reading. Even those who look upon reading as a waste of time read in railway trains, where time seems to them so plentiful that they can afford to waste it. And next to railway trains, what more appropriate place for reading than on shipboard on a long voyage for good sailors or even bad ones when the weather is fair? What, asks Frau, did passengers do on long voyages when there were no novels? They must bless the man that invented them, he says. But on his voyage to Australia, he reread the classics, discovering that in the absence of outward distractions, one can understand and enjoy these finished relics of the old world. It was on his voyage to India in 1834 that Macaulay performed the greatest of his Herculean feats as a man of books, making the passage a bookman's holiday and his ship a reader's paradise. His power of finding amusement without companions was pretty well tried, and it stood the trial, as he knew it would. I read insatiably, he tells Thomas Flower Ellis in a letter from Oudicamund, and it just says 1/7/1834. Evidently that is directing us to Life of Trevelyan, it says in the footnote there. The Iliad and Odyssey, Virgil, Horace, Caesar's commentaries, Bacon's De Augmentis, Dante, Petrarch, Aristo, Tasso, Don Quixote, Gibbon's Rome, Mill's India, all the 70 volumes of Voltaire, Sismondi's History of France, and the 7 thick folios of the Biographia Britannia. And as he devoured, he brooded, comparing authors and impressions of previous readings, liking the Iliad a little less and the Odyssey a great deal more than heretofore, a preference he shares with Tennyson. More than ever charmed with Horace, not quite so much with Virgil. The want of human character, the poverty of his supernatural machinery, stuck me very strongly. Can anything be so bad as the living bush which bleeds and talks, he asks, of the harpies who befoul Aeneas's dinner. It is all, he thinks, as extravagant as Aristo and as dull as Wilkie's Epigonad. So he waxeth eloquent on this great theme, liking Virgil in his last 6 books, which he had not fully corrected, better than the first 6. He liked him best on his Italian ground, preferring his local and national enthusiasm, his allusions to his own country, its history, its antiquities, and its greatness, and finding overall a resemblance to Sir Walter Scott, though no true mental affinity. The Georgics pleased him better, the Eclogues best, and the 2nd and 10th best of all. But he thought the 5 lines beginning Cepibus in nostris parvum to Rosinda mala, some Latin there going down to our footnote, and it just says Eclogue, the finest lines in the Latin language, and is amused to find Voltaire pronouncing them the finest Virgil. Others have tasted identical delights, as Alexander never travelling without those admirable poems of Homer in his company, Napoleon making Werther and Ossian his inseparable companions on his voyage to Egypt, Samuel Butler reading Gibbon very carefully on his way out to New Zealand, John Wilson Crocker treasuring Crabbe's Tales on a sea voyage. Many have read with great content on lakes and rivers. Wonderful, says A. Edward Newton, how conducive to reading I found the stuffy smoking room of the little steamers that dart like water spiders from one landing to another on the Italian lakes. Picture William and Dorothy Wordsworth and Coleridge reading poems on Grasmere, letting the boat take its own course towards Loughrigg. Samuel Pepys in his barge between London and Barn Elms with John Evelyn's late new book Against Solitude. William Beckford with gargantuan appetite, buying Gibbon's library to have something to read when passing through Lausanne, shutting himself up for 6 weeks from early in the morning until night, only now and then taking a ride. The people thought him mad as he read, himself nearly blind. One of the slender volumes of Matthew Arnold's verse had been Lord Morley's cherished companion on many a journey. It takes little compass, and in it anybody who is for a short interval a traveller, away from the hurry of the world's rough business. They may well find beauty to refresh, wisdom to quiet, associations to remind and collect. Others again, in the opposite extreme, and they are the greater number, look upon travel as a time for light reading, or they would escape from its solitariness by means of magazines, newspapers, and such ephemera. To serve them, news agents and booksellers have fixed bookstalls in railway stations, and on most harbours, piers, jetties, landing stages used by travellers. In past times, those who went on a journey carried all the books they might need with them, perforce. Nowadays, the bookstalls are our travelling libraries, and Tauchnitz has girdled Europe and English literature. But whether reading be idle or studious, frivolous or profound, travel in so mutable and kinetic an age as ours, offers a golden opportunity for the enjoyment of books or other printed matter, which I observe most travelers take, for few move about printless. And that brings us to the end of reading on a journey. And journeys are one of my favorite times to read. I travel several times a year via rail train, and I reserve some of my favorite reading projects in the year specifically to read on a train. For instance, as I work my way through the Diary of Samuel Pepys, I seem to be saving him for train travel. Same thing with the Letters of Madame de Sévigné that I finished earlier this year. I read, I would say probably half of Madame de Sévigné's letters when traveling. And I've got another couple of train journeys coming up in the next couple of months. And so I think Pepys will be in my travel carry-on bag for those trips. Perhaps a little bit of the works of Parkman that I recently added to my library. I think train travel is an excellent time to read, memoirs and selections of letters and history and great big books that require a lot of attention and concentration. At least that's what I find. But we'll pop the bookmark in here for today on page 256. The next section here is titled Reading at the Toilet, which we'll read on here in the next video to see what that's all about.